Welcome to Exhuming the Truth, the podcast where we delve into the mysterious worlds of cold cases, missing persons, true crime, and the fascinating science that is forensics. I'm forensic scientist and criminologist Asha Walther, and I am so thrilled to have you with me on this journey as we dance in the shadows of the world of crime, shining a light on scientific discovery while becoming another voice for those who need it most. So grab a drink and get comfortable while we jump into this episode together. This podcast is recommended for persons over the age of 18 and contains explicit content not suitable for minors. We will be covering sensitive content that can range from sexual assault, physical, mental, social, and emotional abuse, suicide, homicide, murder, attempted murder, and other violent crimes, including crimes involving weapons and drugs. This often extends to drug misuse and other harmful and illegal activity. If you find any content to be distressing, I have listed a number of resources that may be able to help you in the podcast notes. I'd also like to remind our listeners that all victims and all perpetrators are someone's loved one, so I ask that in any discussions in our group or on our social accounts that you remain respectful of that at all times, and by listening today, you acknowledge that all persons of interest remain innocent until proven otherwise. Hello, my beautiful squad. Thank you for joining me today. There's a lot going on at Exhuming the Truth right now, and I'll share a little bit about it, but I don't want to bore you too much. But I wanted to say, people keep asking me what I'm watching, and I thought I would say, I have a few shows on the go. It depends on my mood, to be quite honest. I like to take out, my emotions on what I'm watching, if that makes sense. So if I'm sad, I'm watching something sad so I can cry and cover it up. But I really because of the work that I do and because it's so emotionally intense, I like to watch things that I don't really need to use my brain for. So that's usually Wife Swap or something like that. But I have to say that today on Disney Plus, the new season of The Bear is out, and I love that show so much, and I have waited for this day. So that's what I'll be watching tonight. I am nearly done with Yellowstone. In regards to crime-related shows, actually on Prime, I'm watching, can't remember what it's called, but it's Gordon Ramsay going into a Brixton? Is that what it's called? Brixton Prison in England. And he is trying to teach a bunch of inmates how to cook and run their own business service from the kitchen within the prison. So I'm really enjoying that, actually. So there's that. That's what I'm watching. What else is going on? I am about to start my master's. So initially I was doing forensic research masters, and I love forensics so much, but I have this sense of urgency, of doing something with a purpose. And I just felt the uni I was at, I was not supported at in any way, shape or form. In fact, the people there were quite condescending. They weren't very inclusive of people with disability. And I just didn't have a good experience at all, really. I had lecturers take my work and things like that. So I just felt really uncomfortable. And in terms of the forensic research, I did love it, but I thought, who's this helping right now? And I could be doing other things that are helping people right now and helping better society for when my kids are adults, so that they don't have to face, all of the adversities that we're facing systemically and in society. So that's why I decided to drop that for those bunch of reasons collectively, and started Exhuming the Truth, and I've put everything into it, which I'll continue to do. But on the side, I'm going to be studying my Masters of Human Rights, and that is basically so I can advocate better for you guys and for families and for your rights in knowing about forensic evidence and evidence to do with cases and things like that, victim advocacy, policy reforms and things like that. So I'm really, really excited about that. And Curtin seems to be a really inclusive university, so I'm really excited to give those guys a go. So that's really exciting. I feel really positive about that, which is kind of rare because usually I get a bit in my head. So thank you for the well wishes on that. What else have I got? I did this personality test. It's I think there's 16 results. I'll have to post it on social media. You basically do a quiz/test, and it asks you all these questions about yourself and your thoughts on different things. And it comes back with a personality type. And I came back with INFJ, which is the advocate. Yes, I had a little giggle, which was quite funny because it's the most rare personality type, I believe it said, which I believe because I'm definitely a weird person. But it really validated my career path. Like I felt like, yes, I'm doing the right thing. And I've had so many of you be so positive and so nice about the podcast and the work I'm doing. And it feels so nice, like, to have support, especially from people that don't know you and they just reach out and they're like, hey, like, I really enjoyed this, or good job. I'm like, yes, like, I love this so much. So thank you so much for everybody for being so nice. And I'm also interested to see like what personality types you guys get. So I'll try and find the link for that personality test, and we can get together and have a little chat about that. I think that's really interesting. But coming up, in terms of personal cases in Australia, we have Aaron Clear, who has been missing since March 2020 in Belmont, New South Wales. We're doing an episode there. We've got Tristan Griffiths, who's been missing since January 2025 from the Kalgoorlie region in WA. Who else have we got? We've got Luke Gilbert, who was shot and killed by Queensland police. We have another gentleman named Corey, who also went missing. I believe the suburb or the town was called Lehman, which is north of Perth. He went missing apparently on his kayak, but there's a few little inconsistencies with that story that we want to get out. We have another gentleman who's missing in Albany, Western Australia. So there's a lot of cases coming up, and the only reason it's taking me a little bit of time to get to these is that I do go back and forward with the families to make sure that all the details that I've put in are correct, because the last thing I want to do is like represent a family and get something wrong and like give misinformation. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, the information that's out there, you know, on Google from the media and from the police, it's actually incorrect, particularly in the case of Aaron Clear. There's a lot of misinformation about, you know, the date he went missing, when he was last seen, and things like that. And those are really, really important pieces of information. So I really like to go back and forward a couple of times and be like, look, I know this is annoying, but please, can you triple check this? I don't want to present, you know, your loved one's story incorrectly. So that's what's taking me the time. But I am doing the work. Trust me, guys, I am doing the work. I'm working full-time hours trying to get all of this done and out to you guys so we can get help. While I'm on the topic of help, we still have an urgent call out for Joshua Bishop. He is still missing in the Sunbury area. It's been several weeks since he's been missing. We have got a couple of people who are interested in doing a search party, so I'm going to start up a group chat with that. So if you're interested, just get in contact and I'll add you to that chat, and I might do some aerial gridding for you guys to have a look in certain areas. That's a really urgent one, and his family are just so desperate, and I can't imagine what they're going through. So any help and support and positive comments that you guys can throw their way is really helpful, and just continuing to share. I know it seems like not much, but keeping his name out there and reminding everyone, hey, like, this man is still missing, it puts the pressure on. And that's really important in missing persons. So I'm going to stop waffling on now, because I know there's a couple of people who are not enjoying these big, long introductions. But today I'm talking about the Karen Reid case. If you're unfamiliar with it, don't worry, I'm going to go over that. And I really wanted to do this even though it's an American case, because it's very complex and it's very interesting, and it falls under like a systemic barrier, I would say, basically, of a corrupt system, in what I certainly believe is a corrupt system, and a group of people of authority banding together trying to pin something on an innocent woman who has been proven innocent in the last couple of days. So we're going to go through that. It's a really interesting case, and I feel like this episode might go for a little while, so get comfortable. So Karen Reid was found not guilty of the murder of her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe. This was January 29th in 2022. Okay, now there have been 2 trials in this case. So just to summarize, Karen Read was charged with second-degree murder, among other charges. I believe they were like drink driving related charges, in the death of her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer. So the prosecution alleged that she actually hit him with her SUV, in the late to early hours, so around midnight, and left him in the snow to die in January of 2022. But her defense are arguing that she was being framed and it was a cover-up by other law enforcement figures. So keep in mind, her boyfriend John was a police officer, and the other people in question in this story are also colleagues of John, so they're also police officers. So let's just do a little bit of a who's who. So we've got Karen Read, okay? She's a private person. She lived in suburban Massachusetts. She was a finance professor, like a very intelligent woman, an adjunct professor in finance at the Bentley University. She worked in investment banking and finance and had a background in economics and finance. So, plain and simple, she was smart, educated, career-oriented, had no children. She didn't really have a desire to have children. She was a very strong and independent woman. She lived in Mansfield, Massachusetts, and was in a relationship with John for about 2 years prior. She had no criminal history or anything like that. Anyway, so then we've got John O'Keefe, who was the boyfriend who passed away. So he was a dedicated Boston police officer. Tragically, I believe it was his sister and his brother-in-law, they passed away, and their 2 children were left in John's care. So he was basically a father to these 2 children. He had been in the Boston Police Department for 16 years, and he had served in numerous units like the gang investigations, narcotics, etc. He was very hardworking and loyal, low drama, clean record. And as I said, his sister and brother-in-law passed away in 2013, which left the 2 young kids to him. So he was their legal guardian. And he lived in Canton, Canton, Massachusetts. Now, when Karen spoke about like the dynamics of their relationship, like she was so blunt and upfront. And I think that's what rubbed people the wrong way. Like there's a lot of people who are on, either side of the fence here. If they're for Karen, they're 100% for her. And if they're against her, they're 100% against her. I honestly don't know how anyone could come to the conclusion to be against her, but that's their prerogative. I honestly think it's probably because of her demeanor. She is very confident. She speaks well. She's intelligent. She's independent. And she's all the things that, us as women want women to be, but society are afraid of, in a sense. So she did speak about, the troubles in their relationship were very superficial. She said that they usually argued because she would spoil the children. She would spend quite a lot of money on them. I think in the more recent times leading up to his death, she had bought the little girl an expensive jacket, and he said that was spoiling her, so they would have arguments over things like that. She was so upfront and open. You can look at all of her interviews. Like she says, like she's so black and white. When she's irritated, she's irritated. When she's not, she's not. And she just comes across as someone who just really has nothing to hide, and I really love that about her. And even the videos, they show like home videos of her growing up, and she still had that same demeanor. She was very confident. She spoke very well. She knew what she wanted. And she was like pretending to host TV shows in her home videos. Like she was a confident woman. And I love that. I love that about her. And throughout this trial, I love that about her. And also as somebody who sat through a court case about me, I can completely relate to her when people are saying, if she smiles when she's in the courtroom, then she's fake. And if she's not crying, then she's not remorseful, and all these things. And it's just not true. Like when you've got all these eyes on you, particularly if you've got your whole life on display and being filmed, you can't like it's so hard to know how to act. And when you're in a courtroom for some bizarre reason, you're not to show any emotion. Like, the lawyers don't want you to smile. They don't want you to cry. Like, they don't want any emotion. And that's just not in the human condition. It's not natural, and it's actually quite difficult. And a lot of the time, particularly with women, when you're concentrating and you're trying not to show emotion, you can get that resting bitch face kind of look, and people think that, you're a certain type of way. And that was the kind of feedback she was getting, like, oh, well, you're not crying, so you're not upset about this, and things like that, which is just totally ridiculous. But I'm going to go into like a couple of the case conspiracies, because the internet and TikTok have been hilarious in this case with the conspiracies, and there's a couple of good ones, but I'm going to go through them, and you can have a look and see which ones you kind of side with and see where you're at the end of the episode. I'm really interested to know everyone's thoughts. So this is just like a bit lighthearted and a bit of fun, but these are some of the most common and wildest conspiracies coming out of this case. So like I said, I'm going to leave them with you. And before we get into the details of the case, you can see your thoughts, and then check your thoughts after you've got all the facts. I'll tell you which theories I side with as well, and we can compare and have a bit of a laugh. But the big one is the cover-up crew theory. So this is centralised around Karen being framed by a collective of fellow cops and investigators to protect someone else, which likely is to be somebody else who was inside the Albert household where John O'Keefe was allegedly dropped off. The key players of the cover-up crew, they are Brian Albert, who is a Boston cop and owner of the Canton House, and he was also hosting the house party at that residence that night. We have Colin Albert, who is Brian's nephew. He is rumoured to have been at the house party despite claims otherwise. We've got the state and local police investigators. They're accused of botching and manipulating evidence. We have the prosecution's team, allegedly in bed with law enforcement and not pursuing leads inside the house. The cover-up crew theory argues that John was beaten or killed inside that residence, possibly by Colin or another guest, and then was dumped outside to frame Karen Reid. The next theory is the planted evidence theory. The planted evidence theory essentially claims that physical evidence was tampered with or staged. So in this story, you're going to hear about a broken tail light. So the broken tail light pieces on Karen's SUV found near John O'Keefe's body are suggested to be planted days after the initial search. Because it was actually a blizzard at the time, snow patterns show the body should have been more buried by ploughs of snow if it had been there all night. The next theory is it was the dog. And no, I'm not joking. There was a German Shepherd dog inside the Albert residence that was said to be unfriendly and with unknown guests. The dog's name was Chloe. Bless her soul. The injuries that John had could very well be consistent with that of a dog bite or scratch marks, especially the ones on his arm, up and down his arm. The next theory is the deleted data. There was a number of phones tied to the people inside the Albert residence that were not searched at all. So those phones were actually disposed of in a military base. Red flags. And then the phones that were searched had deleted data. So if this is true, that can be called intentional obstruction or selective enforcement. So that's an interesting one. The next theory is the small town mafia. This is like a web sleuth theory that basically says Canton, Massachusetts is run like a boys' club where law enforcement protect their own, basically. So investigators are insular and outsiders like Karen Reid get scapegoated. So this even extended to assumptions of other cases that could have also been buried or ignored to shield insiders, so insiders being law enforcement, with cases in the area that are unsolved being questioned in support of this small town mafia theory. And then we have Karen Reid, aka the Patsy. So they are calling Karen Reid the Fall Girl. Think the emotional ex-girlfriend, an outspoken, easy to blame during a chaotic investigation, easier to charge her than to blow up the careers of half a dozen Boston cops theory. some of these theories actually hit the courtroom. So I'm going to run you through this retrial. No smoke, just full on fire. I'm going to take you to April 2024. This is the first trial. Now, remember at the start, I said there were 2 trials, okay? April 2024, the first trial began in Norfolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. So the first trial was actually a hung jury. So they call that a mistrial, and therefore they had to be retried. So after deliberating for days, they were deadlocked and couldn't come to a consensus, and were even instructed to try again by the judge, and they came back with the same result. So from here, the judge declared the case a mistrial, and the prosecutors in the case opted pursuing a new trial. Smart move. So the judge declared a mistrial on the 1st of July 2024. There are conflicting dates online about that date, but it was around about July 2024 that was declared a mistrial, okay? The second trial began this year. So January the 14th, 2025 was the pre-trial conference. January 27th, 2025, the retrial was scheduled to begin on the 1st of April, okay? So come April, we have the jury selection. June, the jury began the retrial, and June 18 was the verdict delivery. So what are the court accusations? What the hell am I going on about here? We have Karen Read charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter, leaving the scene of a fatal accident, and drink driving. So the prosecutors allege, so these are the people trying to put Karen Read behind bars. So this is the cops, essentially. It's basically cops versus Karen, okay? So the prosecutors allege in January 2022, after a night out, Read allegedly struck her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer, with her SUV while dropping him off at a colleague's house. They then allege she left him in the snow, unconscious, leading to his death from hypothermia and blunt force trauma from the vehicle. Okay? That's in simple terms. Now, the defense has come back, and their argument, so this is Karen's team, are coming back saying Karen didn't kill John. He was beaten inside the house where the other cops were and dragged outside as part of a cover-up by law enforcement insiders. Let me just mention my favourite part about this trial is the autopsy results. John O'Keefe had injuries inconsistent with being hit by a car. His injuries were like assault injuries. He had black eyes, he had scratches, and he had blunt force trauma to the back of his head. The house he was dropped to was owned by Brian Albert, as I said, a fellow Boston cop, I'm so sorry, accusing multiple officers and state investigators of being involved in a conspiracy to protect the real culprits, suggesting Chloe, the German Shepherd dog in the house, could have contributed to O'Keefe's arm injuries. Now, the 24-hour period leading up to this is a dark rabbit hole. A very dark rabbit hole. But I've got the shovel and a torch to guide you through it, so let's get digging because this gets so interesting. Okay, I'm going to try and make like a mind map to go with this so you don't get confused on the who's who. But we're going to go through the key figures in the trial. Just to refresh, we've got Karen Read, you know she's the girlfriend. You've got John O'Keefe, you know he's the boyfriend who got killed. Okay, we've got Brian Albert, the retired Boston police officer and homeowner of the residence where John O'Keefe's body was discovered. Okay, then we have Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor is the lead state police investigator who was actually later dismissed for alleged misconduct during the investigation. So, red flag. Then we've got the defense team and we have the judge. So, they're the main names you're going to want to keep in your mind. So basically the story goes like this. Karen and John had a disagreement about Karen spoiling the children. There was going to be a blizzard that night, okay? Karen decided, I'm going back home. They live separately but stayed together often. So she thought, I'm going to go back home. When she got home, she thought, nah, if I'm going to be, trapped in a blizzard, I'd rather be with the kids and John and having fun. So she decided to go back up there, right? John actually had work drinks planned with his friends from the police, academy or whatever. And that was with the people whose house they ended up at. So they went to a couple of places drinking. Karen drove with John in the passenger seat and Jen McCabe called. So Jen McCabe, that's another name you're going to want to remember. She was drinking with them, and she's gone back to Brian Albert's house with the other police officers, okay? And she's called John, giving him the address, making sure he's at the right place. Because it's a blizzard, they'd been drinking. Karen was very aware she was drink driving. She pulls up at the Fairview Street address, and she says, can you go out, go to the door and make sure we're all good to come in? Because it was very late / early in the night / morning, and she wanted to be sure that they were okay because there was a house party going on. John got to the front door. She witnessed John go inside, okay? So it had been 5 to 10 minutes. She's thinking, what the hell? She'd called him several times being like, hello, like, are we good to come in? Like, why are you not coming back out? She admits she's getting frustrated. Like, she's like, why did you just leave me in the car in a blizzard and just go inside the house and, like, not tell me if we're welcome or not? So she thought, fuck this, I'm going home. In all honesty, I probably would have done the same thing. So she has driven home. She's woken up early hours of the morning, I believe around 5 a.m. And she is looking frantically for John. He's not home. She's freaking out, okay? So she rings Jen McCabe, who was at that address, and she says, I can't find John. I need your help. So she drives back over to the Fairview Street address, and she notices John's body on the front lawn covered in snow. And her first thought was, I've hit him. So that's what she's yelling out at the time. She's going, I've hit him, thinking that, she must have reversed and hit him as she left. So from there, they are calling inside the house. Let me just add, inside the house, the owner of the house and his wife, okay? One's a police officer, one's a paramedic. They claim to not hear any of this commotion out the front, the screaming, the yelling, the ambulance coming, the paramedics coming, nothing. They claim to hear nothing, okay? Even though there's a paramedic inside, Jen McCabe does not go back inside and ask for help and say, come and help us, John's unresponsive outside. No, they don't do that. They just, hang around outside with Karen, waiting for paramedics to arrive. Okay, and all this time Karen's thinking, oh my fucking God, like, I've hit him. And she was the first to say that. No one was like, you must have hit him. She was like, oh my God, I've hit him. Okay. Now, when they come to trial, Jen McCabe's phone data comes up. It is around 2:30 a.m., okay? It was around 12/1 when Karen dropped John O'Keefe at this residence. Okay, so Jen McCabe has Googled off her phone at 2 a.m. Hoss long to die in the cold, aka she was trying to write how long to die in the cold. At, I believe it was 2:37 a.m. she had typed this into Google. She'd obviously been drinking, and why is she Googling how long does it take to die in the cold at 2:30 a.m. while Karen's back at her house asleep? Well, does she know that somebody's outside? I think so. When she gets on the witness stand, she denies making that search at 2:37 a.m. and she says she made that search after Karen arrived at the house freaking out that she'd lost John, and that she did that at around 6 a.m. even though her cellular data, like her phone data and a phone specialist who collected the data came out and was like, this is at 2:37. So that's that part of the story. Now, once this is like all gone down, Karen's car was taken so that they could keep it for testing, okay? And at this time, her rear tail light was not fully damaged when they impounded her vehicle. But later on, the rear tail light was fully damaged, and pieces of that tail light were found surrounding the area where John's body was that they just happened to miss upon the initial search. Now, when they did their initial search and didn't find any of this because it wasn't there and they planted it there, they did not search inside the house. No one went inside the house. No one inside the house was questioned. Nothing inside the house was tested. Nothing like that. which was like absolutely ridiculous. And then Brian Albert, who owned that house, and that house was actually in his family. It was a generational home, passed down, passed down, passed down. Weeks after John's found dead in the front lawn, sold the house. Where's Chloe, the German Shepherd dog? They got rid of her. Where's their mobile phones? They got rid of them at a military base. So all of these things come together quite nicely for Karen, because like I 100% believe her and believe that she is innocent, and I think this is like a disgusting tactic by the authorities, and the controversy around the evidence collection, just everything, it's so bad. But Jen McCabe actually happily sat there and said, oh, like the timing about searching about dying from hypothermia was after we found the body, not before, even though the evidence literally said 2:30 a.m. So she didn't mind lying about that. Actually, you can jump on Law and Crime to watch this trial, or you can also jump on YouTube and watch it. The witness testimonies are like a lot, and they're very interesting. I highly recommend watching it. Court TV also covers it, and you can see photos of the evidence there. But it basically took 21 hours of deliberation, and the jury acquitted Karen Read of second-degree murder and manslaughter, and they just found her guilty of driving under the influence, which gave her a 1-year probation sentence. Everybody is basically saying that there's no justice for John O'Keefe here by Karen being acquitted. So as Karen said, no one fought harder for John's justice than she did. She was blamed straight away. The family of John O'Keefe turned their back on her and like got like a restraining order against her, so she couldn't contact the children or anything like that. So she was going through like insurmountable grief, losing her partner, potentially thinking like, what the hell, like how has this happened? Now I can't contact the kids that, that have been in my life for 2 years, and then sort of piecing together what's actually happened here. And like, she saw John go inside that residence. All of those cops are claiming he never came inside. John never entered the residence. Well, when you listen to Jen McCabe, I believe it's Jen McCabe and her partner, when they testify, if you play those two videos next to each other, they actually say the exact same thing word for word in a couple of their answers. So talk about rehearsing answers. Then their daughter comes on, after Jen McCabe and her partner are saying, oh no, John was never in the house. John never came in the house. He never, we never saw John. The daughter comes to the stand and she says, she's talking about Colin. And she says, oh, Colin was never at the house when John was there. Which, whoops, like she just blurted out when John was there. So it's a lot of contradictions in this case. I'm really glad that Karen got acquitted. And I'm really disappointed in the state, actually, for not taking this further and, making a new trial even to find out what actually did happen to John O'Keefe. Because forensically speaking, I did make some notes. I want to read them to you because I learned quite early on in forensics. There's a couple of things that you think, would be obvious, but they're not. And when you're looking at things like being hit by a car, you're expecting certain types of injuries. And, bite marks and scratch marks, it's certainly just not one of them. So here's my notes here. They did a qPCR on John's arm. So that is like a quantitative scientific test to test for what types of DNA have we got here. So essentially they're doing this to test if there was canine DNA to say if he had been bitten or attacked by a dog. So that came back positive for pig. And you're probably thinking, what the hell? But obviously dog treats contain pig. That could be lingering on the dog's teeth. Also, there's a lot of limitations there with testing for DNA because of the snow. I forgot to say that we did have a civilian snowplow gentleman who testified. He was a very credible witness. He came on and just basically told what he saw when he went and plowed the snow at around the time when Karen was there, and when Karen left, there was no body on the front lawn there. And that was his testimony. So the dog's gone. We can't test the dog to compare DNA there. So that's a bit of a issue. I really loved Karen's dad's speech, however, about women's support, because he spoke about the adversity that women face in the legal system and recognizing that not all people have the same support as what they were able to give Karen. And in saying that, Karen lost her home to fight for her own innocence. Her father, like, she lost her jobs, she lost her home. Her father was a university lecturer as well. He lost his job, all fighting for her innocence, which is very sad. But as far as the eye socket injuries, okay, so forensically, when you look at an autopsy and somebody's got black eyes, they didn't fall down, okay? If somebody has got black eye sockets, okay, that this is not an injury where you fall down. If you are falling flat on your face, you're injuring your cheeks, your chin, your nose, your forehead, not your eye sockets, okay? The presence of bilateral periorbital ecchymosis, so that is basically bilateral is both sides, periorbital around the eyes, ecchymosis, bruising. So that is black eyes. Black eyes are not consistent with injuries typically sustained from being struck by a vehicle. In high impact incidents like a pedestrian and vehicle collision, initial contact often results in trauma to like protruding facial structures, like I said, so like the nose, chin, forehead. And that's due to the sudden momentum when you are impacted by a vehicle or hitting the ground. Black eyes result from a direct symmetrical bruising around both eyes, consistent with blunt force trauma. So that is trauma that can be delivered intentionally or from a fall that results in forceful impact to the mid-face. So like if you're falling on like a rocky surface and it's gone into your eye socket. But obviously in this case he was falling onto a front lawn of snow. So notably, such bruising is often associated with direct strikes to the face or trauma to the nasal bridge rather than the type of trauma expected from a vehicle impact. So again, you get a black eye from being punched in the face. You get a black eye from getting a footy to the face, that type of thing. You're not getting a black eye from being hit by a car and falling down. So these forensic findings basically suggest that the periorbital injuries, or the injuries around the eyes, are indicative of intentional force or an isolated fall onto a flat surface rather than an accidental contact with a moving vehicle. So he could have been it's very, very likely he was in a fight inside that house. The injuries on his arms can tell us, those are dog injury wounds or dog inflicted wounds. There was a specialist who testified this, and she had done hundreds of vehicle cases and said that she can confirm with 100% certainty that that is not caused by a vehicle. So whether the dog had anything to do with the death or not, the dog had something to do with the arm. Okay, so that's A. B, we have the eye socket injuries. He was either punched, assaulted, or hit in the face. And C, he had blunt force trauma to the back of his head. And this type of trauma is from an intentional blow or strike with an object, you can say like a hammer, a baseball bat, things like that. So if I was pulling up this case and just looking at the autopsy on its own, not knowing any other facts, which is typically what I do if I'm working a forensics case and they say, hey, can you do a forensic report? I'm not reading everybody's statements because I don't want to know. I just want to look at the scientific facts, and I'm going to tell you what I think this is from. And then they will say, oh, could it have been from a vehicle? And I'd be saying, hell no, it could not have been from a vehicle. No way. Absolutely no way. I have no doubt in my mind, like I can say with 100% confidence that those injuries were not inflicted by a vehicle forensically. So that is a little bit of forensic info for you and my little point of view. But yeah, you can watch this in more detail. Like I said, Court TV, Law and Crime, YouTube. They broadcasted the whole thing. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. And also, if you're interested in doing that personality test, please do, because I really enjoyed that, and it was so me to a T. It tells you if you're introverted or extroverted or both, and your career path. Because sometimes I really question myself because I love forensics and crime so much, but I also love to help, and I also love work with a purpose. And I'm like, am I doing the right thing? And when I did that, it was like, you're an advocate. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I am. Master of human rights. But yeah, okay. That's going to be all. I'm going to end that there. If you want more on that case, I'm happy to go into it because I've been watching it every night and rewatching it because I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of other bits and pieces, like the police officer who got stood down because he was calling Karen a CUNT, looking for nude pictures of her and all this horrible stuff. So the case is really quite twisted. But yeah, that's all for today. So thank you for being here and for allowing me to waffle on about this case, because I have been really deep into it since it began in 2022. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will chat with you shortly. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed it here. If you have, you can subscribe to stay up to date on new episodes, or you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Please feel free to jump onto our Facebook group to join in on the case discussions. You can find the link to our group in our podcast notes. As always, stay curious, stay informed, and until next time, trust your instincts and keep seeking the truth.